And then when I became 40, these people put funny signs in my yard and told me I was over the hill. Oh, I wish I could be 40 again. That is so young. See, by the time I got these signs, and there's a photograph at my retirement from Kimball, my son had a picture of me standing in front of the Ginsboro Bar Station with all these signs out, over the hill, that type of thing. And at 40-something happened, I realized my parents knew something. Think of that. And then I turned 50, and I began to realize there's a lot I don't know. Then when I became 60, I realized that life is a constant learning experience. And I began to realize how little I know, and how insignificant I am in some ways. And I wish I would have had that attitude when I was young. It makes life all different. And I began to realize how precious life is. My grandmother used to say an old quote that's been said many times, it's a shame that youth is wasted on young people. And I used to say, oh, that's an old person saying. But I know what they mean by that now. If I knew what I know now, if I knew back then, things would be different. But the saddest part of all that is, and I say it in this way, if I would have known back then what I know now spiritually, oh, how I would have lived my life different. I don't have any regrets. I wouldn't want to undo anything in my family, my wonderful wife and children. But I do wish I would have served the Lord earlier in my life. But I was too stubborn and too much of a know-it-all. And I went to ministry at the age of 30. I could have gone sooner, but I fought that because I wanted to do it my way. But the Lord had other plans. When I think of communion, and I think of the death of Christ, I have in my mind a visual image of that. That's been captured by many. I think in the movie Ben-Hur, which we've all seen, I've got a tape of it, and that crucifixion scene is rather dramatic, as you see it with the lightning and the earthquakes and all of that. But I think of Christ dying on the cross. Now, I was a tough sell for Christianity. It took 13 months for a church praying for me and a minister really counseling me. And I just wouldn't say yes to Jesus Christ. And people said, why do you fight? I said, I just don't know about that. I don't want to just give my life away. You only live once. And I said, I want to be free. I want to do what I want to do. But what a fool I was. Because once you know Christ, you are free and free indeed. To think that as I go through my life, the Lord will guide and direct me. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Now, I did make a mistake that I said several times here. Our retirement, I was going to throw in breaks and do whatever I wanted to do, and I've learned my lesson on that. And for God once, I'm going to do it. What I'll do a year from now, I don't know. And I'm not worried about it. Because you know what? We're in the hands of the Lord. And that's the way we've got to live our lives. And I hope on this Communion Sunday you can think about that when you take the bread and the cup. What is communion? It's a great sacrament. It is the sacrament. John and Charles Wesley referred to it as a great mystery. And that means we can only try to describe it, but it's something we have to experience. And to realize the symbols of the bread and the wine, the body and blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Would you die for another person? Maybe for your children you would. But most of us wouldn't die for some stranger. And they sure wouldn't die for some person that they didn't like. But Jesus came to earth for one reason, and that was to dwell among us, proclaim the gospel for 3 years, and suffer an agonizing death. Do you realize how horrible crucifixion was? A Roman form of punishment. And eventually, it was considered so inhumane that it was banned as a form of punishment, a form of death. The agonizing, horrible thing you have to go through. And yet, Christ did that. And it's interesting that Christ chose the time period and chose the worst form of death. You might say he let himself experience the utmost in agony, and he did that just for us. But something else happens in this communion ceremony. We call it in the Methodist Church a remembrance. We don't believe in transubstantiation or consubstantiation. But we look at it as a commemorative act or memorial. Do this as often as you would a remembrance of me. We do it to remember what Christ died. And so I hope when you come up this morning, you come up with the attitude, of remembrance and gratitude for what Christ has done for you. And it says that we proclaim this when? Until his coming again. And Christ will come again. In Sunday school, they talked about in the video there about the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday we celebrate, and how they rejected Jesus Christ because the Jews were preoccupied with one thing. They wanted a king who would conquer the Romans. They were obsessed with that. But they missed the real point. Isn't it something how we can miss the real point? And why did they miss the point? Because they were preoccupied with something else. Many times we miss the real point because we're preoccupied with the things of life. We're so interested in all the things we can acquire and do that the spiritual side takes a back seat. And that's a real shame. But we come and proclaim this until Christ's coming again. So when you come up for communion this morning, remember this. We are commemorating something because one day Christ will come again. And there'll be a time when we won't do like we're doing now. Somebody asked me the other day, you think there'll be church in heaven?